My name is Karen, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought my life would shatter with just one text message. I built a successful jewelry business from nothing, created my own path despite my family's disapproval. Then last Tuesday, my phone buzzed. The message from my mother read, "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now." Ha ha ha. My hands trembled as I stared at those cruel words. I didn't realize then that this rejection would lead to something that would change everything. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey from heartbreak to unexpected triumph. I grew up in a large colonial house in Portland, Oregon, where appearances meant everything. My mother, Beverly, was obsessed with status and control. She had our lives mapped out from the moment we were born. For me, that meant medical school, marrying a doctor or lawyer, and living in the same exclusive neighborhood. My father, Frank, rarely contradicted her. He was the definition of conflict avoidant, always retreating to his home office when voices raised. My younger brother, Gerald, was the perfect son in their eyes. He followed their plan without question. Pre-med at 19, internship at my father's friend's hospital by 22, and now at 29, he's a successful cardiologist engaged to the daughter of my mother's tennis partner. The perfect trajectory for the perfect son. I was always the problem child, though I never understood why having my own dreams made me difficult. From an early age, I loved creating things with my hands. When I was 8, my grandmother Rose gave me a small jewelry-making kit for Christmas. Beverly rolled her eyes and said, "That's cute, but don't get your hopes up about turning hobbies into careers." She promptly enrolled me in advanced math and science programs. Throughout high school, I maintained the GPA my mother demanded, but spent every free moment sketching designs and creating pieces in my bedroom. I would sit cross-legged on my floor at midnight, beading and wire wrapping by the light of a small desk lamp, always listening for footsteps in the hallway. When college application time came, the battle lines were drawn. Beverly had applications ready for 5 prestigious schools with renowned medical programs. I had secretly applied to art school in New York. Art school, Beverly had laughed when I finally revealed my acceptance letter. That's not a real education. That's where people go when they can't do anything useful. Frank had stood by the fireplace staring at his drink. "Karen, be reasonable. We've invested so much in your science education. Don't throw it away on a whim." That was the first major break, when I packed my bags and moved across the country despite their threats to cut me off financially. I worked 3 jobs while studying, developed my own distinctive style of metalwork, and gradually built a following online. By my final year, I was selling enough pieces to cover my expenses. Upon graduation, I declined job offers from design firms to launch my own brand, Forged Feathers. Over the next decade, I built my business piece by piece. I moved back to Portland, not to my parents' neighborhood, but to a vibrant artistic district downtown. I rented a small workshop, hired 2 assistants, and eventually expanded to a storefront gallery. My work was featured in national magazines and celebrities, occasionally commissioned custom pieces. All this success meant nothing to Beverly and Frank. At family gatherings, they'd introduce Gerald with a detailed account of his accomplishments, then gesture vaguely to me with, "And Karen makes jewelry." When relatives asked about my business, Beverly would change the subject or say something like, "Yes, it's keeping her busy until she finds something more stable." Last month, I made the mistake of bringing my boyfriend Dennis to a family dinner. We'd been dating for almost a year, and at 34, he was successful in his own right. A contractor who had built his company from scratch after working construction since high school. He had rough hands, an easy laugh, and treated me with more respect than I'd ever received in that house. "Construction," Beverly had repeated when I introduced him, her eyebrows nearly disappearing into her hairline. "How interesting. And did you finish college, Dennis?" Dennis had smiled politely. "No, ma'am. Started working right after high school to help support my mom after my dad passed." I saw the judgment flash across my mother's face, the quick glance she exchanged with my father. Throughout dinner, she peppered him with questions clearly designed to highlight what she perceived as his inadequacies, while Frank nodded along and Gerald studied his plate uncomfortably. That dinner was tense but survivable until dessert, when Dennis reached for my hand under the table, and I decided it was time. "We have some news," I said, feeling a flutter of both excitement and dread. "Dennis and I are engaged." The silence that followed was deafening. Beverly set down her fork with a precise clink against fine china. "Engaged," she finally said. "You've known each other for a few months. This seems rather impulsive, Karen, though impulsivity has always been your specialty." "It's been a year, Mom," I corrected. "And I'm 32, not 17. "Well," she continued as if I hadn't spoken, "I suppose we should have expected this. Dennis seems like a nice enough young man, but surely you understand our concerns about compatibility." Dennis shifted beside me, but remained silent, letting me handle my family as we'd agreed. "Compatibility?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Lifestyles, dear. Educational backgrounds. Future prospects." She gestured around the formal dining room with its crystal chandelier and oil paintings. "You were raised with certain expectations." "Mom," I said quietly, "I've never cared about any of that. Dennis is kind, hardworking, and respects what I do. That's what matters to me." Beverly laughed. That cold, dismissive laugh I'd heard my entire life. "Respect for your little hobby, Karen. When will you grow up? You could have been a surgeon by now. Instead, you're playing with beads and wire, dating a man who hammers nails for a living." That's when something inside me snapped. "My little hobby grossed over $300,000 last year," I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. "My work has been featured in Vogue and worn on red carpets. Dennis doesn't just hammer nails. He owns a company that employs 15 people and completes high-end renovations across 3 states. I stood up, pushing my chair back with more force than intended. "But you know what? None of that should matter. What should matter is that I'm happy and successful on my own terms. That I've found someone who loves me for who I am not, who he thinks I should be." Beverly's face hardened into the mask I knew too well. "If you walk out that door with him, Karen, you're choosing to reject everything we've done for you." I looked at my father, hoping for any sign of support, but he just cleared his throat and said, "Your mother is upset because she cares about your future, Karen. Don't be dramatic." Gerald stared at his plate, saying nothing. "I'm not rejecting you," I said, gathering my purse. "I'm just asking you to accept me and the life I've built. If you can't do that, that's your choice." We left that night thinking it was just another fight, another uncomfortable family dinner that would eventually be smoothed over with careful avoidance of sensitive topics. I had no idea it was the last time I would set foot in that house. The next morning I woke up to the buzz of my phone on my nightstand. Squinting at the bright screen, I saw my mother's name and felt the familiar mix of hope and dread. Maybe she was reaching out to apologize, or at least to begin the usual process of pretending nothing had happened. What I read instead made my blood run cold. "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now. Ha ha ha." I sat up in bed, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. I read the message again, sure I must have misunderstood. The casual cruelty of it ending with that mocking ha-ha, it didn't seem possible even from Beverly. I immediately tried calling her, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried my father next with the same result. Even Gerald's phone sent me to voicemail after a single ring. Within minutes, I discovered they had all blocked me on social media as well. This wasn't just anger. This was calculated excommunication. I lived in my own apartment downtown, so being locked out of my childhood home wasn't a practical emergency. But I still had belongings there. Photo albums, childhood mementos, some of my early jewelry designs, and a small safe with important documents. More importantly, this wasn't just about access to a building. This was my mother explicitly telling me I no longer had a family. "They can't be serious. Dennis said when I called him, my voice breaking as I explained. This is some kind of power play. They'll cool down. I wanted to believe him, but something in my gut told me this was different. Beverly had issued ultimatums before, had given me the silent treatment for weeks after big disagreements, but she had never been this explicitly cruel. I need to go over there, I said. I need to talk to them face to face. Dennis offered to come with me, but I decided to go alone. This was between me and my parents, and bringing Dennis would only give Beverly more ammunition. I drove to my parents' house that afternoon, rehearsing what I would say. I would be calm, mature, willing to discuss our differences like adults. I would appeal to my father's more reasonable nature when Beverly wasn't in the room. As I turned onto their street, my confidence began to waver. By the time I pulled up to the wrought iron gates that protected their driveway, my palms were sweating. I punched in the gate code I'd known for years, 1290, my father's birth month and year, and received an error message. I tried again, thinking I must have mistyped, but got the same result. They had changed the gate code. I parked on the street and walked up to the pedestrian entrance beside the main gate. As I approached, I noticed a new security camera mounted above the gate, its red light blinking as it tracked my movement. This was new. My parents had always resisted visible security measures as tacky. The small pedestrian gate was locked with a new keypad system I didn't recognize. I pressed the intercom button, and after a long moment, our family housekeeper, Marcia, answered. Hello? Marcia, it's Karen. Can you let me in, please? I need to speak with my parents. There was a pause, and I could hear muffled voices in the background. I'm sorry, Miss Karen, Marcia finally replied. Her voice strained. Mrs. Lawson says you're not allowed on the property. She says if you don't leave, she'll call the police for trespassing. I stood there in shock, staring at the intercom. Marcia had known me since I was a child. She had bandaged my scraped knees and smuggled cookies to me when I was studying late. Now she was delivering this message as if I were a stranger. Marcia, please, I said, hating the desperation in my voice. Can you just tell my father I need to speak with him? It's important. I'm sorry, she repeated, and the intercom went silent. I stayed there for another 10 minutes, alternating between pressing the intercom button and calling their phones. No one responded. Eventually, I noticed one of the neighbors watching me from their front yard, phone in hand, clearly considering whether to report the disturbance. Defeated, I returned to my car. As I sat in the driver's seat, my phone buzzed with another text from Beverly. Your continued harassment is pathetic. We've packed your remaining possessions and donated them to Goodwill. Consider it our final contribution to your independent lifestyle. Do not contact us again. I drove home in a daze, tears blurring my vision so badly that I had to pull over twice to collect myself. By the time I arrived at my apartment, I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped away everything inside me and left just a shell. This wasn't just a fight. This wasn't just disapproval. This was my mother, the woman who had given birth to me, who had once read me bedtime stories and taught me to tie my shoes, telling me I was dead to her because I had chosen to love someone she deemed unworthy and pursue a career she couldn't brag about. And my father and brother had allowed it to happen. The days that followed passed in a blur of shock, grief, and anger. I stayed with my best friend Janice for the first few nights, unable to be alone with my thoughts in my apartment. Janice had known my family for years and was appropriately outraged on my behalf. They've always been controlling Karen, but this is next level, she said as we shared a bottle of wine on her couch. They've basically disowned you because you got engaged to someone who doesn't fit their country club image. I keep thinking there must be more to it, I said, staring into my glass. Like maybe there was something else building that I missed. Don't do that, Janice said firmly. Don't look for ways this could be your fault. Your mother is a narcissist who can't handle not controlling you, and your father is too weak to stand up to her. This is about them, not you. Intellectually, I knew she was right. But 3 decades of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight. The voice in my head, which sounded suspiciously like Beverly's, kept whispering that if I had just been more accommodating, more willing to compromise, this wouldn't have happened. By the third day, I realized I needed to think practically. The things they had supposedly donated included legal documents I would need to replace: my birth certificate, some insurance paperwork, the deed to my grandmother's lake cabin that she had left me years ago. I wasn't sure if they had actually donated these items or if that was just another cruelty designed to cause me stress, but either way, I needed to start dealing with the practical fallout. I returned to work trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythms of designing and creating. My workshop had always been my sanctuary, the place where I felt most competent and at peace. But now I found myself staring blankly at half-finished pieces, my creativity blocked by the emotional turmoil. My two assistants, Paula and Vicky, noticed the change immediately. "Are you okay?" Paula asked on the second day when I had spent an hour redoing the same wire wrap because I couldn't get my hands to stop shaking. "Just some family stuff," I said, attempting a smile that felt more like a grimace. "I'll be fine." But I wasn't fine. Orders were backing up, and I kept making elementary mistakes I hadn't made since I was a beginner. When I ruined an expensive piece of raw turquoise by dropping it on the concrete floor, I broke down crying in the storage room. Dennis was incredibly supportive throughout this period. He came over every evening, bringing dinner when I forgot to eat, listening as I cycled through the same hurt and anger, repeatedly offering practical suggestions for replacing documents and never once saying, "I told you so," about my family's reaction to our engagement. "I can go with you to the county office to get a new birth certificate," he offered. "And I have a buddy who works at a locksmith. We can get duplicates of any keys you need." His matter-of-fact approach to solving problems was comforting, but I was reluctant to drag him further into my family drama. "You don't have to do all this," I told him. "This isn't what you signed up for." Dennis took my hands in his. "Actually, it is exactly what I signed up for. When I asked you to marry me, I wasn't just signing up for the good times. I was signing up for all of it, including your crazy family." Despite his support, sleep became elusive. I would lie awake until the early hours, replaying the dinner, the text messages, the scene at the gate. I started having stress dreams where I was locked outside my childhood home in a snowstorm, pounding on windows, while my family sat around the dinner table inside, ignoring me. The lack of sleep affected my work even more. I missed a deadline for a major client, something that had never happened before. My online sales began to dip as I fell behind on social media engagement and new product listings. The business I had built so carefully that I had thrown in my mother's face as proof of my success was starting to show cracks. About a week after the initial text, I received another message, this time from Gerald. I nearly dropped my phone in my haste to open it, hoping for some sort of olive branch, or at least an explanation. Instead, I got, "Mom and Dad asked me to tell you to stop driving by the house. The security system alerts them every time, and they're considering a restraining order if you don't stop harassing them." I hadn't driven by the house since that first day. The security alerts were probably from delivery drivers or neighbors. But the accusation and threat hit me like a physical blow. Even Gerald, who had always been the peacemaker in the family, was now participating in the gaslighting. I typed back, "I haven't been anywhere near the house. I just want to talk. Please, Gerald." The message showed as delivered but not read. He had probably blocked me immediately after sending his message. That night I had the worst panic attack of my life. Dennis found me on my bathroom floor, hyperventilating and sobbing. He helped me through the breathing exercises my therapist had taught me years ago, then insisted on staying the night, sleeping on the couch so I wouldn't be alone. The next morning I called Joyce, my therapist from college, who had helped me establish healthier boundaries with my family years ago. She was able to fit me in for an emergency session that afternoon. "What they're doing is emotional abuse," Joyce said after I explained the situation. "Cutting you off, completely threatening legal action, spreading misinformation among family members. These are classic isolation tactics used by abusers." "But why now?" I asked, twisting a tissue between my fingers. "I've disappointed them for years. I've dated men they didn't approve of before. Why is this time different?" Joyce considered this. You said you've recently become more successful, more established in your career. And now you're getting married, taking another significant step into independent adulthood. They may feel they're losing their last chances to control you. We spent the session developing coping strategies and discussing practical next steps. Joyce suggested documenting everything in case I needed legal protection later, focusing on self-care and leaning on my support network. As I was leaving, she said something that stuck with me. Karen, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for toxic people is to stop allowing them to be toxic to you. I was mulling over her words the next morning when I received an email that would change everything. The email arrived at 8:43 a.m., exactly 2 days after my therapy session with Joyce. I almost missed it as it went to my spam folder, probably because it came from a law firm I didn't recognize, Harrington, Myers and Webb. Subject urgent. Estate of Rose Elizabeth Franklin. My grandmother's name caught my eye immediately. Rose had been my mother's mother, a gentle, artistic woman who had always been my secret ally. She had passed away 3 years ago, leaving most of her modest estate to Beverly, with a small cabin on the lake going to me, the cabin my parents now claimed they had the deed to. The email was from Richard Webb, a partner at the firm. Dear Ms. Lawson, I am writing regarding the estate of your grandmother, Rose Elizabeth Franklin. It has come to our attention that you may not have been properly notified of certain provisions in your grandmother's will and testament. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss this matter. Given recent developments within your family, this has become an urgent issue requiring your immediate attention. Sincerely, Richard Webb. Partner, Harrington, Myers and Webb. My first thought was that this must be another attack from my parents. Perhaps they were challenging my ownership of the cabin or had discovered some legal loophole to take it away from me. Why else would the lawyer mention recent developments within your family? With shaking hands, I called the number in the email signature. The receptionist transferred me immediately when I gave my name, which only increased my anxiety. Ms. Lawson, thank you for calling so promptly, said a deep, measured voice. This is Richard Webb. I've been trying to reach you for several days. I just saw your email this morning, I explained. Is this about my grandmother's cabin? There was a pause. Not exactly. Are you able to come to our offices today? This is a matter best discussed in person. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. Can you at least tell me what this is about? Are my parents contesting the cabin deed? Another pause. Ms. Lawson, I was your grandmother's personal attorney for over 20 years. I am not representing your parents in any capacity. Quite the contrary. He wouldn't say more over the phone, but managed to fit me in at 11 a.m. that same day. I called Dennis, who offered to come with me, but I decided to go alone. If this was going to be bad news, I wanted to process it privately first. The law offices were in a sleek downtown building, all glass and polished wood. Richard Webb was an older man with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He greeted me with a firm handshake and ushered me into a conference room where a younger female attorney was already seated. This is my colleague, Charlotte Burke, he said. She's been handling some of the details of this matter. Charlotte nodded professionally but warmly. Thank you for coming in, Ms. Lawson. Richard took a seat across from me. Karen, may I call you Karen? I want to start by saying how sorry I am about the situation with your family. Your grandmother would have been deeply distressed by their behavior. This was not what I had expected. How do you know about that? He exchanged a glance with Charlotte. Your grandmother anticipated something like this might happen eventually. She was well aware of your mother's temperament. He slid a folder across the table. What I'm about to tell you may come as a shock. 3 years ago, when your grandmother passed away, the will that was executed was actually her secondary will. I frowned, confused. Secondary will? Charlotte jumped in. Your grandmother created 2 legal wills. The first one, the public one that your family is aware of, left most of her estate to your mother with the cabin going to you. But there was a second conditional will that would only be executed under specific circumstances. Richard nodded. Rose left explicit instructions that if at any point your parents disowned you, cut you off, or attempted to coerce you through financial or emotional manipulation, the second will would immediately supersede the first. My mouth felt dry. And you think that's happened now? Based on the documentation you've provided to Charlotte over email, the text messages, the statement from your friend about being locked out of the family home, the threats of a restraining order, yes, we believe the condition has been triggered. He opened the folder. Under the terms of the second will, Rose's entire estate passes to you, Karen. Not just the cabin, but all of it. Her investments, her art collection, the family property in Aspen, and her share of your grandfather's business holdings. The room seemed to tilt around me. That's not possible. My mother would have contested that immediately. Your mother doesn't know about it, Charlotte said gently. The second will was created with the utmost confidentiality. Rose was very specific that it should only be revealed when necessary. Richard handed me a sealed envelope. Rose left this letter for you to be delivered when and if the second will came into effect. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and unfolded a sheet of cream-colored stationery covered in my grandmother's elegant handwriting. My dearest Karen, if you're reading this, then my fears about Beverly have proven true. I've watched for years as she tried to force you into a mold you were never meant to fit. I've seen your spirit nearly broken, then rebuild itself stronger each time. I never had the courage to stand up to her in life, a regret I carry with me. But perhaps I can provide you some protection in death. This inheritance isn't just money and property, my darling girl. It's freedom. Freedom to create the life you want on your terms. Freedom from the manipulation and control that have been Beverly's weapons for too long. I've watched you build your beautiful business from nothing. I've seen the fire in your eyes when you talk about your art. Don't let anyone, especially not family, extinguish that fire. My attorney will help you navigate the legal aspects of this inheritance. There are resources to protect you if Beverly contests the will. Though my lawyers assure me it's ironclad, remember that the greatest inheritance I can leave you isn't material. It's the knowledge that you are loved exactly as you are. Your creativity, your independence, your kind heart, these are precious gifts. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. All my love, Grandma Rose. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. I hadn't cried since that panic attack on my bathroom floor, but these were different tears, a release of something long held tight inside me. Richard gave me a moment to collect myself, then continued. The estate is substantial, Karen. Rose was a shrewd investor and your grandfather left her well provided for. The total value is approximately $4.7 million. I nearly choked. Million? He nodded. Your mother was only aware of a fraction of Rose's assets. The bulk of the estate was held in trusts and investments that Beverly knew nothing about. She tried to contest the cabin deed, I said, remembering my mother's threats. She said she found a problem with it. Charlotte smiled slightly. She did file some preliminary paperwork challenging your ownership. That's actually how we became aware of the situation. When her attorneys contacted us, we realized the conditions of the second will had been met. So what happens now? I asked, still trying to process the magnitude of what I was hearing. Now, Richard said, we execute your grandmother's wishes. The transfer of assets has already begun. Charlotte will work with you on the details, but essentially everything that was provisionally left to Beverly now passes to you. The reality of the situation began to sink in. My grandmother, quiet, gentle Rose, who had always slipped me extra art supplies and whispered encouragement when Beverly wasn't listening, had created the ultimate safety net for me. She had seen the truth about my mother long before I had fully admitted it to myself. And now, in a stunning reversal, the parents who had locked me out and thrown away my possessions were about to learn that their actions had cost them millions. Does my mother know yet? I asked. Richard shook his head. The formal notification will be sent this afternoon. We wanted to speak with you first. I sat back in my chair trying to imagine Beverly's reaction when she received that letter. After a moment, I asked, "What would you advise me to do now?" Charlotte leaned forward. "First, secure your personal safety. People can react unpredictably to news like this. We'll help you get restraining orders if necessary. Second, start thinking about how you want to manage these assets. This is life-changing money, Karen. And third," Richard added, "remember that this was Rose's choice. She wanted you to have not just financial security, but peace. How you proceed with your family from here is entirely up to you." As I left the law office an hour later, clutching a folder of documents and preliminary paperwork, I felt something I hadn't experienced since receiving that first text message, a sense of power. Not the cruel power my mother wielded, but the power to choose my own path forward, free from financial threats or emotional manipulation. My grandmother's final gift wasn't just money. It was the chance to truly break free. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of emotions and practical considerations. I fluctuated between shock, vindication, grief, and anxiety so rapidly it left me dizzy. Dennis was as stunned as I was when I shared the news. $4.7 million, he repeated, his eyes wide. Your grandmother was secretly loaded and left it all to you to protect you from your mom. That's about the size of it, I said, still not quite believing it myself. Dennis was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm not sure whether to be happy for you or worried about what happens next with your family." "Both is the correct answer," I replied, attempting a smile. We were sitting in my small living room, the legal documents spread across my coffee table. Charlotte had provided a detailed inventory of the estate investment accounts, real estate holdings, art and antiques, and a collection of rare books I hadn't even known my grandmother possessed. The sheer scope of it was overwhelming. "What are you going to do?" Dennis asked. I shook my head. "I honestly don't know. Part of me wants to call my mother and say, 'How do you like me now?' But that's just anger talking." "That would be understandable," he said. "After what they did to you." "Maybe. But it wouldn't solve anything." I picked up my grandmother's letter, which I had read at least a dozen times since leaving the lawyer's office. Grandma Rose didn't do this so I could get revenge. She did it to give me freedom. Dennis reached for my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. This doesn't change anything between us." I squeezed his hand gratefully, but the truth was, it did change things. Not our feelings for each other, but the dynamics of our relationship. Yesterday I had been a small business owner with modest savings. Today I was a millionaire. The imbalance made me uncomfortable, especially given my mother's fixation on social status and financial compatibility. "We should talk about a prenup," I said. "Not because I don't trust you, but because it's the smart thing to do." Dennis nodded. "Absolutely. I was going to suggest it myself." His easy acceptance reassured me. Dennis had always been secure in himself, never threatened by my success or independence. It was one of the things I loved most about him. The next morning I had another session with Joyce. I needed help processing not just the inheritance, but the complex emotions around my grandmother's secret protection. "I keep thinking about all the times Grandma Rose was there for small moments in my life," I told Joyce. "She came to every art show, every school presentation. She would slip me encouraging notes when my mother was being particularly critical. But she never directly confronted Beverly, never openly took my side." Joyce nodded. That generation often handled family conflict differently. Direct confrontation wasn't always their way. "But she was planning this the whole time," I said, still amazed. "Creating this secret safety net for me. She must have known exactly who my mother was, how she would react if I ever truly broke free." "It sounds like Rose was trying to protect you in the only way she felt she could," Joyce said. "Sometimes older generations, especially women of that era, used indirect power when direct confrontation seemed impossible." We spent the session exploring my feelings about Rose, the gratitude, but also the complicated grief of realizing she had seen my mother's toxicity clearly, but hadn't been able to shield me from it during her lifetime. The inheritance gives you options, Joyce pointed out, but it doesn't obligate you to any particular course of action with your family. That afternoon, I received a call from Charlotte. Beverly's attorney has been in touch, she said without preamble. They're requesting an urgent meeting. My stomach tightened. She's going to contest the will. Most likely, Charlotte confirmed. But as Richard mentioned, your grandmother created an extremely solid legal document. Beverly can challenge it, but her chances of success are minimal. What should I do? You don't have to meet with them at all, Charlotte said. We can handle everything, but if you want closure, a meeting might provide that, on your terms with legal representation present. I thought about it overnight, discussing the options with Dennis and Joyce. By morning, I had made my decision. I would meet with my parents, but not at their house or their attorney's office. The meeting would be on neutral ground with Charlotte present, and I would set the agenda. Charlotte arranged everything: a conference room at a downtown hotel, security if needed, and specific parameters for the discussion. Beverly and Frank initially pushed back, demanding we meet at their attorney's office, but eventually conceded when it became clear this was their only opportunity to speak with me directly. The day before the meeting, I received another surprise. Gerald called, not texted, actually called, and asked if he could see me privately. I don't know, Gerald, I said, wariness in my voice. The last time you contacted me, you accused me of stalking the house and threatened a restraining order. I know, he said, sounding genuinely remorseful. Mom dictated that message. I shouldn't have sent it, but you know how she gets when she's on a mission. I did know all too well. What do you want to talk about? Everything, he said. The will, what happened at dinner, all of it. I need to explain some things, Karen. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop. I liked a place my parents would never go because it was too bohemian for their tastes. When Gerald walked in, I barely recognized him. My perfectly put-together brother looked haggard with dark circles under his eyes and his usually immaculate hair uncombed. You look terrible, I said as he sat down across from me. He attempted a smile. Thanks. You look surprisingly okay considering. I have good people around me, I said simply. Gerald nodded, fiddling with a packet of sugar. Karen, I'm sorry. I should have reached out sooner, should have stood up to Mom when she started all this. Why didn't you? He sighed heavily. The same reason I never do. It's easier to go along. Especially now that she's... He trailed off. Now that she's, completely unhinged about the will, he finished. She's been on a rampage since she got the letter. Fired her attorney, hired a new one, started researching ways to prove Grandma was mentally incompetent when she created the second will. This didn't surprise me. Is that why you wanted to meet, to warn me about her legal strategy? Gerald shook his head. No, I wanted to see you because this whole thing made me realize something. I've been living my entire life according to Mom's blueprint. Medical school, the right kind of practice, the right kind of fiancé. I've never once asked myself what I actually want. And what do you want? I asked, genuinely curious. I don't know, he admitted. That's the pathetic part. I'm 29 years old, and I've never seriously considered any path but the one Mom laid out. Watching her completely disown you for making your own choices, it's like looking into a mirror and seeing what my life could be if I ever step out of line. For the first time, I felt real compassion for my brother. He had always seemed like the lucky one, the favorite, the one who effortlessly pleased our parents. I had never considered that his compliance might be a prison of its own. It's not too late to make changes, Gerald, I said gently. Maybe. He looked up at me. Did you know about Grandma's second will all these years? I shook my head. I had no idea. We were close, but she never mentioned anything about it. Mom's convinced you must have manipulated Grandma somehow. She can't accept that Grandma saw her clearly and made this decision on her own. That sounds like Mom, I said. Always someone else's fault. We talked for almost 2 hours. Really talked in a way we hadn't since we were kids. Gerald shared how suffocating life had become trying to meet Beverly's ever-escalating expectations. I told him about building my business, about the freedom I'd found in creating art on my own terms. As we were preparing to leave, Gerald said, "I'll be at the meeting tomorrow. Mom doesn't know I came to see you today." "Whose side will you be on?" I asked, not accusingly, just realistically. He looked tired. "I don't think I can be on anyone's side right now, but I'm going to try to speak the truth, whatever that costs me." That night I barely slept. I kept rehearsing what I would say to Beverly and Frank, ranging from icy formality to raw emotional honesty. By morning, I still wasn't sure which approach I would take. I would have to decide in the moment. Dennis drove me to the hotel, but agreed to wait in the lobby. "This is between you and your family," he said, "but I'm right here if you need me." Charlotte met me at the elevator, professional and reassuring in a tailored navy suit. "Remember," she said as we rode up to the conference room, "you're in control of this meeting. We can end it at any time." When we walked into the room, they were already there, Beverly and Frank on one side of the table, their attorney beside them, and Gerald sitting slightly apart, his expression unreadable. Beverly's face was a mask of controlled anger, while Frank looked older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. "Karen," Beverly said, her voice clipped, "I see you've wasted no time leveraging your newfound position." So that's how it was going to be. No pretense of reconciliation, just straight to hostility. Charlotte stepped forward. "Before we begin, I want to clarify the purpose of this meeting. We're here to discuss the execution of Rose Franklin's legal will and testament. This is not a negotiation or a preliminary hearing. The will has been validated and is being executed according to Ms. Franklin's explicit wishes." Beverly's attorney, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit, cleared his throat. "We believe there are grounds to challenge the validity of this so-called second will. Mrs. Franklin was 86 when this document was supposedly created. We have concerns about undue influence and diminished capacity." Charlotte smiled politely. "Those concerns have been anticipated and addressed. Mrs. Franklin underwent a comprehensive cognitive evaluation the same day the will was signed, specifically to prevent such challenges. The evaluation was conducted by 2 independent geriatric specialists who both certified her as fully competent. Additionally, the will includes an in terrorem clause, a no-contest provision that would automatically disinherit anyone who challenges its validity." I watched my mother's face as Charlotte spoke. The color drained from her cheeks as she realized the extent of Rose's planning. "My mother was of sound mind until the day she died," Beverly said coldly. "But she was susceptible to manipulation. She always had a soft spot for Karen's dramatics." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I didn't need to rise to her bait. "I had no knowledge of this will until 2 days ago, Mom. Grandma Rose made this decision on her own years ago." "And why would she do that?" Beverly demanded. "Why would she bypass her own daughter in favor of her granddaughter? It makes no sense unless you poisoned her against me." Gerald, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke. "Mom, that's enough. You know exactly why Grandma did this." Beverly turned on him, eyes flashing. "Stay out of this, Gerald. This doesn't concern you." "Doesn't it?" he said quietly. "Grandma saw how you treated Karen. She saw the constant criticism, the emotional manipulation, the way you tried to force her into the life you wanted instead of the one she chose. And now you've proven her right by completely cutting Karen off for getting engaged to someone you don't approve of." Frank finally spoke, his voice tired. "Gerald, you're not helping. This is a legal matter, not a family therapy session." I looked at my father. Really looked at him and saw not the intimidating figure of my childhood, but a weak man who had spent his life enabling Beverly's worst impulses rather than risk her disapproval. "Actually, Dad," I said, finding my voice, "this is exactly about family. Grandma Rose created this will as a direct response to how this family operates. She knew that someday Mom's need to control everyone would lead to exactly this situation." I turned to Beverly. You disowned me. You changed the locks, threw away my possessions, and told me I didn't have a home anymore, all because I dared to love someone you consider beneath us and build a career you can't brag about at the country club. We were trying to protect you, Beverly insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Dennis is clearly after your money, and now— Dennis has no idea I'm here today, I interrupted. He didn't want me to come at all. He was worried about what seeing you would do to my mental health. That's the man you're so convinced is a gold digger, someone who cares more about my well-being than his pride or status. I leaned forward. And for the record, we're getting a prenup. His idea as much as mine. So you can stop pretending this is about protecting me. Charlotte gently touched my arm, a reminder to stay focused on the legal matters. I nodded and continued more calmly. I didn't come here to negotiate or to gloat. I came to make sure you understand that this is happening. Grandma Rose left her estate to me, and I intend to honor her wishes by using it to build a life free from manipulation and conditional love. Beverly's face hardened. So that's it. You take everything and walk away after all we've done for you. The question hung in the air. Everyone in that room knew what Beverly and Frank had done for me. The private schools where I was constantly reminded I wasn't living up to expectations, the luxurious home where I never felt safe to be myself, the family name that came with suffocating expectations. No, I said finally. I'm not just walking away. I'm offering you a choice. I reached into my bag and pulled out a document Charlotte had helped me prepare. This is a proposal for how we might move forward as a family. It includes regular family counseling with a therapist of my choosing, a commitment to respectful communication about my career and relationship choices, and a clear understanding that any further attempts at manipulation or control will end our relationship permanently. I slid the document across the table. These are my boundaries. You can accept them and we can try to build something healthier, or you can reject them and we go our separate ways, with me in control of Grandma Rose's estate either way. Beverly didn't even glance at the paper. This is blackmail. No, Mom, I said tiredly. This is a boundary, something I should have established years ago. Gerald reached for the document and began reading it. Frank glanced at it over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. You have 2 weeks to decide, I said, standing up. After that, I'll assume your answer is no and we'll proceed accordingly. As Charlotte and I prepared to leave, Gerald stood too. I need some time to think, he said, not to me or to our parents, but to the room in general. About a lot of things. Beverly's face registered alarm for the first time. Gerald, what are you talking about? He didn't answer, just nodded to me and walked out ahead of us. In the elevator, Charlotte turned to me. That went better than I expected. Did it? I wasn't so sure. You said what you needed to say on your terms, she pointed out. That's a victory in itself. As the elevator doors opened to the lobby, I saw Dennis waiting, concern written across his face. When he saw me, relief flooded his features. How did it go? He asked, taking my hand. I considered the question. I'm not sure yet, but I think I finally said what I've needed to say for 32 years. He squeezed my hand. Proud of you. Walking out of that hotel with Dennis beside me, and the weight of decades of silent compliance lifted from my shoulders, I felt something unexpected compassion. Not just for myself or for Gerald, but even for Beverly and Frank, trapped in patterns that had brought them wealth and status, but not happiness or genuine connection. Grandma Rose's inheritance wasn't just giving me financial freedom. It was giving me the chance to break generational patterns and build something new. 6 months passed more quickly than I could have imagined. Spring turned to summer, and summer began its slow fade into fall. My life transformed in ways both dramatic and subtle, like a landscape changing with the seasons. The first and most practical change was business-related. With a portion of my inheritance, I purchased a historic building in the Arts District, a beautiful brick structure with large windows and high ceilings. The ground floor became a proper showroom for forged feathers, with expanded workshop space in the back. The second floor I converted into offices and a small art school where I began teaching metalwork and jewelry design to aspiring artists. Paula and Vicky stayed on now with proper benefits and salaries that reflected their talent and dedication. I hired 3 more artisans, creating a small but vibrant creative team. Our online presence grew and orders increased to the point where we had to create a wait list for custom pieces. The third floor of the building became my personal studio, a light-filled space where I could experiment with new techniques and designs without the pressure of production deadlines. Having that creative sanctuary helped heal the wounds left by my family's rejection. When I was working with metal and stone, transforming raw materials into something beautiful and enduring, I felt connected to Grandma Rose and her quiet, persistent creativity. Dennis and I decided to postpone our wedding until the following spring, giving us time to adjust to all the changes. We bought a modest but beautiful craftsman house, halfway between my new studio and his construction company headquarters. Despite my newfound wealth, we were determined to build a life that reflected our values, not Beverly's obsession with status and appearance. The prenuptial agreement was straightforward and fair, drafted by Charlotte and reviewed by Dennis's own attorney. It protected the bulk of my inheritance while ensuring Dennis would never be financially vulnerable if our marriage ended. The process brought us closer, forcing us to have honest conversations about money values and our vision for the future. As for my family, the situation evolved in unexpected ways. The 2-week deadline for a response to my boundaries came and went with no word from Beverly or Frank. I wasn't surprised, but the finality of it still hurt, a dull ache rather than the sharp pain of those first cruel messages. Gerald, however, took a different path. 3 weeks after our meeting at the hotel, he called to tell me he was taking a leave of absence from his cardiology practice. "I need to figure out what I actually want," he explained. "I've been on autopilot for so long I don't even know if medicine is my passion or just Mom's plan for me." Over the following months, we rebuilt our relationship one coffee meeting at a time. Gerald began therapy, started exploring interests he'd abandoned in his youth, and eventually broke off his engagement to the country club daughter, who was as much Beverly's choice as his own. "Mom's not speaking to me either now," he told me with a wry smile during one of our meetings. "Apparently I'm throwing away my future and embarrassing the family." "Welcome to the club," I replied, and we both laughed, a genuine healing laugh that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. The legal aspects of the inheritance were finalized without further challenges from Beverly. Charlotte kept me updated on the process, handling the complex transfers and tax implications with calm efficiency. By midsummer, everything was settled, the investments restructured according to my priorities, the properties either sold or transferred to my name, the art and books carefully cataloged and insured. One rainy afternoon in September, I met with Richard Webb one last time to sign the final paperwork. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said as I handed back the signed documents. "Not just of how you've handled the inheritance, but of how you've handled yourself through all of this." "I hope so," I said. "Sometimes I worry that I've been too harsh with my parents, that I should try harder to reconcile." Richard shook his head. "Rose was clear about one thing above all else. She wanted you to be free to make your own choices without guilt or manipulation. Whatever relationship you have or don't have with Beverly and Frank should be your decision based on what's healthy for you." His words stayed with me as I drove home through the gentle rain. That evening, sitting with Dennis on our back porch, watching raindrops pattern the garden we'd planted together, I shared something I'd been considering for weeks. "I want to start a foundation," I said, "using part of Grandma Rose's money to help young artists and entrepreneurs who don't have family support." Dennis nodded encouragingly. "That sounds perfect. What would you call it?" "The Rose Foundation for Creative Independence." I replied, the name coming to me fully formed. It would provide grants, mentorship, maybe even housing for people who are trying to build creative careers against family resistance or financial obstacles. "Your grandmother would love that," Dennis said, squeezing my hand. "I think she would," I agreed. "It feels like the right way to honor what she did for me, passing on not just financial support, but the courage to create my own path. The foundation became my passion project over the following months. Working with Charlotte and a nonprofit specialist, I established the legal framework, created an application process, and recruited a small board of directors, fellow artists and entrepreneurs who understood the challenges of building a creative career without a safety net. By the time winter arrived, we had selected our first 3 grant recipients: a young photographer who had left an abusive home, a furniture maker whose immigrant parents couldn't understand why he had abandoned a respectable office job, and a fashion designer from a rural community where her ambitions were dismissed as unrealistic. Watching these talented individuals receive not just funding but validation and community support was profoundly healing. Each time I saw the relief and hope in their eyes, as they realized they could pursue their dreams without sacrificing their integrity, I felt Grandma Rose's presence, her quiet wisdom and gentle persistence living on through this new generation of creators. My last therapy session with Joyce fell on a crisp December morning, exactly 6 months from the day I received that first cruel text from Beverly. "How are you feeling about everything now?" Joyce asked, as our session neared its end. I considered the question carefully. I'm still sad sometimes about what might have been with my family, but mostly I'm grateful for Dennis, for Gerald's new path, for the foundation, for all of it. Even for the hard parts, in a way. The hard parts. Learning who my parents really are was painful, I explained. But it was also clarifying. I spent so many years trying to earn love that was always conditional. Now I know that genuine love doesn't work that way. Joyce nodded. That's a powerful lesson. Grandma Rose knew it all along, I said. She just couldn't find a way to teach it to me directly. So she created this elaborate backup plan instead, knowing someday I'd need it. And now you're creating backup plans for others, Joyce observed. I smiled at the connection I hadn't consciously made. I guess I am. As I prepared to leave what would likely be our final regular session, Joyce said, "I've rarely seen someone transform trauma into purpose as effectively as you have, Karen. Whatever else happens with your family, hold on to that achievement." 3 days before Christmas, I received an unexpected email from Frank. It was brief and awkward, but it was the first direct communication from either of my parents in 6 months. "Karen, I hope this message finds you well. I've been thinking about everything that's happened and my role in it. I should have stood up for you many times over the years and didn't. That failure is on me, not you. Beverly isn't ready to accept the changes, but I wanted you to know that I'm proud of what you've built both before and after Rose's inheritance. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet sometime after the holidays. Just us, no lawyers or agendas. Dad." I showed the email to Dennis that evening, unsure how to feel about this tentative olive branch. "What do you think?" I asked. "Is it genuine, or is this just another manipulation?" Dennis considered the message thoughtfully. "It reads genuine to me, but the real question is whether you want to open that door even a crack." "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to give him a chance. Another part is afraid of being hurt again." "You don't have to decide tonight," Dennis reminded me, "or even this month. You get to set the pace now." He was right. That was perhaps the greatest gift Grandma Rose had given me. Not the money or property, but the power to decide my own boundaries, to build relationships on my terms, not out of financial necessity or familial obligation. I saved Frank's email, but didn't respond immediately. Instead, I focused on our first Christmas in our new home, on the foundation's plans for the coming year, on the spring wedding we were planning. A small, joyful gathering of people who truly celebrated our love. Gerald joined us for Christmas Eve dinner, bringing a new friend. Not a romantic partner, but a fellow doctor who had left a prestigious practice to work in community health. Their friendship seemed to represent Gerald's tentative steps toward authenticity, toward relationships based on shared values, rather than social expectations. As we sat around our dining table, not grand and formal like Beverly's, but warm and slightly mismatched, filled with pieces we'd collected individually and together. I looked at the faces of these people who had chosen to be in my life and whom I had chosen in return. This was the family I had built. Not perfect, not without complications, but grounded in mutual respect and genuine care. Whatever happened with Frank and Beverly in the future, this chosen family would remain my foundation. Later that night, as Dennis and I hung ornaments on our tree, I found myself thinking about the girl I had been. Desperate for approval, afraid to fully claim my gifts, measuring my worth against impossible standards. That girl still existed within me, but she was no longer driving my choices. She had been embraced and healed by the woman I had become. "What are you thinking about?" Dennis asked, noticing my momentary stillness. "About journeys," I said. "About how sometimes the longest distance we travel is from who we were taught to be to who we actually are." He smiled and handed me the star for the top of the tree. "That's quite a journey." "It is," I agreed, stretching to place the star. "But worth every step." In the soft glow of the Christmas lights, I silently thanked Grandma Rose, not just for the inheritance that had given me financial freedom, but for showing me in her own quiet way that real love doesn't come with locks that can be changed. Real love opens doors instead. Looking back at everything that happened since that shocking text message from my mother, I realize how much I've grown. The journey wasn't easy, but I'm finally in a place of genuine peace. Those cruel words, "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore," were meant to break me. Instead, they became the catalyst for building something stronger and more authentic than I ever imagined possible. The Rose Foundation is now supporting 12 young creators, giving them not just financial assistance, but a community that believes in their vision. Gerald has found his own path, choosing to remain in medicine, but shifting to a community health center where he feels genuinely fulfilled. Dennis and I were married in a beautiful spring ceremony, surrounded by people who truly celebrate our love and support our partnership. As for my parents, that part of the story is still unfolding. I eventually met with Frank for coffee, a stilted but honest conversation where we both acknowledged past hurts without promising easy solutions. Beverly remains unwilling to accept the new reality, still clinging to her anger and sense of entitlement. I've left the door cracked open, but with firm boundaries that I will no longer compromise. The healing didn't happen overnight. There were still moments of doubt, flashes of the old pain times when I questioned whether I deserved the good things in my life. But with each passing month, those moments became less frequent and less powerful. My therapist Joyce once told me that trauma recovery isn't about forgetting the pain or pretending it never happened. It's about integrating those experiences into a larger story, one where the pain is real but doesn't define you. One where you can acknowledge what was taken from you while celebrating what you've built in its place. I think about my grandmother Rose, often wondering if she somehow knew exactly how things would unfold. Her letter remains on my desk, a reminder that she saw me clearly and loved me exactly as I am. Sometimes when I'm working in my studio shaping metal into new forms, I feel her presence. Not as a ghost, but as an enduring influence, a quiet voice reminding me that creativity and courage are their own kind of inheritance. The most profound lesson from all of this has been about the true meaning of home. It isn't the house you grew up in, or the family you were born into. Home is the space you create, where you can be fully yourself, surrounded by people who don't demand that you shrink or change to be worthy of love. My mother thought taking away my access to my childhood home would leave me homeless and desperate. She never understood that I had been building my real home all along, in my art, in my relationships, in the quiet determination to live authentically despite her disapproval. Today I'm not just surviving without my parents' approval, I'm thriving because I finally stopped seeking it. The inheritance gave me financial freedom, but the real liberation came from breaking free of the need for validation from people who could only love a version of me that didn't actually exist. If you're watching this and struggling with family rejection or conditional love, please know that your worth isn't determined by those who can't see your true value. building a life on your own terms is possible. It may not come with a surprise inheritance like mine did, but freedom takes many forms, and the most important ones can't be measured in dollars. What's your experience with family expectations? Have you ever had to choose between being true to yourself and pleasing others? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and self-discovery. Remember, the family that truly matters is the one that loves you without conditions, whether they're related by blood or by choice. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own journey to authentic living.